Hello and welcome to my annual YouTube upload. Cutting it close with 2 months left in the year, but better late than never, this is my bonsai tree cake recipe and tutorial. All the ingredients will be listed in the description, so let's get started. First, for the chocolate chiffon, you'll need 5 room temperature eggs, and we'll be separating the whites and the yolks. I just use the 2 halves of the shells to do this, but make sure to wash your eggs beforehand if you use this method, just to clean off any dirt or bacteria from the shells. Especially if you're like me and you tend to do things like this. Add your egg whites into the bowl of a stand mixer or just a larger bowl if you're using a hand mixer, and I add in a pinch of cream of tartar for a more stable meringue. Set that aside, and in your bowl with the egg yolks, add in 1 more whole egg. Whisk to incorporate air, and this might seem like a lot of eggs for 1 cake, but chiffons are a sponge cake that uses no chemical leaveners like baking soda or baking powder. So the air in the cake is held up by the proteins in the egg, which gives it its spongy texture. Add in your castor sugar and whisk again to incorporate air, and do the same with your neutral oil and milk of your choice. I used almond milk in this recipe. Okay, fair warning, I filmed and edited this video literally half a year ago at this point, and I think I was just really proud that I had 2 camera angles, so you will see a lot of unnecessary scene transitions. I'm just working with what I have. And finally, a splash of vanilla extract. Here I have 80 grams of semi-sweet milk chocolate that I melted in the microwave in 15-second intervals. Add this into your egg yolk mixture and whisk well to combine. I probably could have used a bigger bowl here, but sift in 90 grams of low gluten flour, also known as cake flour. Now whisk well to combine, and because we're using cake flour, you don't really have to worry about overmixing and overdeveloping the gluten since there's less of it to begin with. Now back to the egg whites, we're going to start to whip up the meringue. I set my stand mixer on medium-high speed and slowly start adding in castor sugar once the egg whites are at a milk foamy texture. So we're going for a stiff peak here, and the meringue should be really glossy and smooth. Once the meringue is ready, in the same bowl, pour in the egg yolk, chocolate, and flour mixture. Now, this part you definitely can overmix. You want to softly fold the batter into the meringue with a spatula, making sure that you don't deflate it. Just go around the bowl, pushing the batter back into itself, if that makes any sense. Once everything is thoroughly combined, I'm lining a 6-inch baking tin with reusable parchment paper and pouring the batter in from about a foot high. This just pops any larger air bubbles that were in your batter. Swirl the batter in a pan with a skewer or chopstick just to break up any of the remaining air pockets. Bake at 350 Fahrenheit for at least 80 minutes with the cake tin in a water bath for best results. And this is the cake out of the oven with the top already trimmed. I was actually super happy with this cake. The bounce and the crumb were all so nice. Honestly, sometimes I surprise myself when things go well. Now moving on to the buttercream, this is a German buttercream, which is pastry cream based. So to 3 egg yolks, add a few tablespoons of castor sugar to taste. I'm whisking it all together until pale and fluffy, and this keeps the buttercream smooth and it also keeps the color light. Now sift in 5 grams of cornstarch and whisk that in as well. Scrape off the sides of the bowl and set aside while you heat up the milk. In a small saucepan, add in 240 grams of milk and a splash of vanilla extract. Heat on a stovetop at low to medium heat until simmering. While whisking, slowly add half of the hot milk into the egg mixture. Then add everything back into the saucepan and whisk over low heat for a couple of minutes until it's completely thickened. And I'm running my pastry cream through a strainer just to make sure that everything is super smooth. I don't particularly like buttercream as it's usually way too sweet, but I can promise you that this buttercream recipe is really rich and delicious with the egg yolks and the milk, and the sugar level is entirely adjustable. And I just cover that in plastic wrap and set it in the fridge to chill for at least 4 hours and preferably overnight. Once the pastry cream has completely set, add it into the bowl of a stand mixer. And Lucy was very interested in this process and also came to check it out. Lucy? Set the mixer to medium-high speed, and once the pastry cream has been whipped smooth, slowly add in your pieces of softened unsalted butter. And the buttercream will definitely look a bit rough at first. Just scrape down the bowl a few times and keep on mixing. After a few minutes, once it's fully combined, the buttercream should be really fluffy and really smooth. I also added in about a half cup of mascarpone cheese just for that extra creamy and little tangy kick to it. Now, once everything is fully whipped, I started adding in powdered sugar to taste. Here you can really personalize the level of sweetness you want in your buttercream, especially because there was so little sugar in the custard base. For this recipe, I'm making an Earl Grey buttercream, so I have 2 Earl Grey tea bags and about 60 milliliters of heavy cream. I microwave this in 15-second intervals for about a minute and a half, and once it's fully cool, I add that into the buttercream. And you can do this with a ton of different teas and flavors. This buttercream is super versatile. The recipe makes about 4 cups of buttercream in total. Now for cake assembly, I'm just very simply frosting the cake with an even layer of buttercream. Okay, so a quick life update, I guess. I took all this footage back in like June or July when it was Father's Day. Right now it's November. More specifically, it's 2:53 a.m. on a Thursday night, and I'm recording this voiceover. And a lot has changed. I quit my job, moved out, got two new jobs, quit one of those jobs, and I'm going back to school in 2 months. But at the same time, it kind of feels like nothing's changed, you know? It's like kind of stagnant. I don't know. Also, I'm sorry if you're not here for my commentary. That's totally fine. Feel free to take the advice of one of my favorite comments I've ever received. I'm sure it will greatly heighten your viewing experience. Now this is just a crumb coat, so I add a very thin layer on top and use a bench scraper to even out the sides. I lined the outside of the cake with acetate just to keep everything neat, and I stored it in the fridge to chill. With the cake scraps, I obviously had to taste test, and it was delicious, as expected. The Earl Grey chocolate combo is unmatched. Now, finally for the bonsai tree. So I decided to get floral wire from my local Dollar Tree. This is the draft image I put together just so I have a visual reference of what I'm trying to go for. And I found this gorgeous photo of a bonsai tree with this two-toned trunk in such a pretty shape. So that's what I was designing my tree around. And this is the floral wire internal skeleton that I made. There's the main stem with smaller branches coming off of it. Lucy is here for moral support as I start the most difficult part of the project. I used modeling chocolate to wrap around the floral wire, and I definitely suggest that you go with store-bought because I made mine from scratch, and for some reason I just could not get it right. It was greasy and crumbly, and it took me over 4 tries. And by the end, I was so over it, I didn't even film the process. So I'll link the video and recipe that I followed to make the modeling chocolate, and hopefully you'll just have better luck than I did. And as you can see, I scrapped the idea of using white chocolate almost immediately because it looked so bad, and decided to just go with milk chocolate, and I would paint over it afterwards to make that two-toned design. And you can see the modeling chocolate is releasing oil from the heat of my hands, so I started using a little spoon to smooth things out instead. I've never worked with modeling chocolate on this scale before, so take everything you see with a grain of salt. Moving quick, this is the final look of the stem, and we're moving on to the leaves. And I'm melting 250 grams of white chocolate wafers, to which I add some oil-based food coloring to make it a leafy green. Now, I know this looks like cat food, but it's actually bran cereal, apparently very good for your heart health, and I mixed that into the melted chocolate. Okay, so I spent so long researching how I would make the foliage on the trees, and I went through a bunch of YouTube videos and articles, but nothing really gave me what I was looking for. Until I stumbled upon this godsend of a YouTube channel run by like the sweetest pastry chef. His channel is Yenier's Cake Tips. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And if you have the time, definitely go check it out. There are some amazing techniques that he shares, including this one, that are just so ingenious. So I'll have his videos linked below. Basically what I'm doing is setting up little bunches of chocolate covered cereal to look like the foliage on the tree, and I'm using balls of parchment paper to support the shape from underneath. And once the chocolate hardens, I can remove the parchment and the piles of cereal will just keep their shape. Lucy has no sense of boundaries or personal space, but she's cute enough to get away with it. And like all my projects, this is definitely a trust the process type of situation. Lucy is quite the sous chef, although I do think I end up ingesting a little more cat hair than is the recommended daily intake. And now for the chocolate ganache to ice the outside of the cake. Roughly cut up 120 grams of semi-sweet milk chocolate and pour 100 grams of hot heavy cream over top. Let sit for a few minutes and then whisk together until smooth. Once the chocolate has fully melted and the ganache is glossy, set aside and let fully cool. Here I'm pushing a small paper straw into the center of the cake where I can insert my tree trunk and setting that on top. So mix the ganache to loosen it up a bit, and once it's at a spreading consistency, you can start icing the cake. So I did a bit of an imperfect swirl pattern on top and really roughly iced the sides of the cake. It's super lumpy and uneven, but that's the natural dirt look we're going for. Or at least that's what I tell myself. And I also smoothed down the base of the tree trunk into the ganache. So this is what we're working with. I made some edible chocolate paint by melting white chocolate with vegetable oil to form a sort of paint consistency. And using a brush, I just layered that on the part of the stem that I wanted to be a lighter tone. It did take me a few coats because I added a little too much oil to mine, but I followed up with a thin detail brush to paint on the wooden texture of the trunk. Next, I decorated the sides with these wafer cookies that I trimmed down and stuck to the sides with some extra ganache. And this was heavily inspired by a Reddit post that I saw. I don't remember the exact user at the moment, but I will credit them on the screen. It was a really beautiful cake, and I thought it was just the perfect base for me to work off of. I scattered some extra bran cereal around the tree for that added health benefit, and I also made some edible pebbles with white chocolate and various shades of gray and black food coloring. While researching ways to make foliage, I found this recipe for edible moss that I'll also link below. You just throw everything into a mug and microwave it for a few minutes. Super easy. Okay, now for the leaves. So the bunches all came out looking super nice, but I realized as I was setting them on the branches that the dollar store floral wire was not holding up. I definitely should have invested in at least Home Depot tier floral wire. So worst comes to worst, I ended up using bamboo skewers to support the stem of the tree, and after that, when the leaves were added back on, it had no problems holding it up. Also, yes, the foliage is just balancing precariously on the branches. I actually ran out of chocolate from all my attempts at making modeling chocolate, and at this point, it was day 4 of working on this project, so I just let it go. And this is the complete cake. I was super excited, as you could see. There's a few dents here and there from the leaves falling off, but if you don't look too closely, I think that it's quite pretty. Also, this is long overdue, but I just wanted to say thank you for your support on my koi pond cake video. It's absolutely insane. I never thought it would get to be where it is now, and I'm not very present on social media right now, but I do still read all my YouTube comments. So thank you for all the good ones. And honestly, thank you for the bad ones too. They're constructive and they are also amusing. So anyways, I do plan to make more videos in the future. When? I couldn't tell you, but I will eventually. So subscribe, maybe? Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you here again.